Ever wonder how a measly $70 fine for overgrown roses turned into a battle that exposed a massive HOA fraud ring? Let me tell you how my nosy neighbor, Karen's attempt to seize my home, backfired spectacularly, and how I uncovered a $50,000 embezzlement scheme that would change our entire community forever. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I never thought coming home from my sick mom's house would lead to the biggest fight of my life. There it was, stuck to my front door with bright orange tape, an HOA violation notice for $79. My hands shook as I read it. Improper garden maintenance, rose bushes, exceeding height regulation by 2.3 inches. Someone had actually measured my roses while I was gone for just 7 days, taking care of my mom after her surgery. I walked to my garden, still wearing my travel clothes, and stared at my beloved roses. These bushes were the last thing my late wife planted before cancer took her 3 years ago. As I stood there, I caught movement from my neighbor's window. Karen Thompson, our HOA garden committee head, quickly ducked behind her curtain. She'd moved in 6 months ago and immediately ran for the committee position, turning our once peaceful neighborhood into her personal kingdom. Looking closer at my roses, I noticed small indents in the mulch around them. Someone had been standing here recently. My security camera caught Karen entering my property at 7 a.m. yesterday, ruler in hand, meticulously measuring each bush while taking photos on her phone. The same Karen who had 3 unkempt trees hanging over my fence, but somehow those never violated any rules. I took my own measurements and photos, then checked the HOA bylaws I kept in my home office. The height regulation was indeed 36 inches, but there was a clause about temporary overgrowth due to homeowner absence. I drafted a polite email to the HOA board explaining my mother's surgery, and attached the hospital documents, expecting this simple misunderstanding would be cleared up quickly. That evening, while making dinner, I heard voices in Karen's backyard. Through my kitchen window, I could see her hosting some kind of meeting. "Property values are everything," she was saying loudly enough for me to hear. "We can't let people turn this place into a jungle." Several board members nodded along, glancing at my house. I tried to sleep that night, but kept thinking about how Karen had started changing our neighborhood. The Jones family had to remove their daughter's rainbow-colored wheelchair ramp last month. The Patels couldn't put up their traditional Diwali decorations. Even old Mr. Chen had to take down his wind chimes, because they weren't an approved design. The next morning, I found an email from the HOA board. My appeal was denied. The fine had to be paid within 48 hours, or late fees would start accumulating. I read it 3 times, my coffee getting cold beside me. The response cited a different bylaw than the one I'd referenced, and Karen's name was at the bottom as the signing board member. I decided to take a walk to clear my head and noticed something odd. 3 houses on Karen's side of the street had roses taller than mine, but no violation notices. I quietly took photos, measuring them against my height for scale. 1 bush had to be at least 45 inches tall. Back home, I started a detailed document of everything. Timestamps from my security camera, photos of other properties' violations, copies of the bylaws, and my appeal. Something felt wrong about all this, but I couldn't put my finger on it yet. That afternoon, Karen caught me in my driveway. She wore her usual pastel cardigan and pearl necklace, carrying her ever-present clipboard. "Oh, about that fine," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We could forget the whole thing if you'd just join our gardening committee. We meet every Tuesday at my house. Of course, you'd need to consider my proposal for re-landscaping the entire street. The vote's coming up next week." I politely declined, saying I needed to review the bylaws further. Her smile vanished. "You really should be more cooperative," she said, writing something on her clipboard. "Things can get very difficult for difficult people." She walked away, heels clicking on the sidewalk. That night, as I watered my roses, I found a crumpled paper mixed in with their leaves. It was a draft of a new HOA proposal, one that would require all front gardens to be redesigned for uniformity by Karen's brother's landscaping company. The pieces were starting to come together, but I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole would go. My phone buzzed. Another HOA email. "Additional violation found. Unauthorized. Garden border stones." I looked at my garden stones, the ones that had been there for 5 years, approved by the previous board. Late fees for the original fine would start tomorrow, and now there was a new $150 fine for the stones. I walked to my office, turned on my computer, and opened a new folder. I named it HOA Investigation. Little did I know, this folder would soon hold the evidence that would shake our entire community to its core. I thought getting that first fine was bad, but what happened next made my blood boil. 3 weeks after I got the silly rosebush ticket, I opened my mailbox to find another HOA letter, this time the $79 fine. had somehow grown to 500. My hands shook as I read through pages of added administrative fees and non-compliance penalties. They hadn't even given me a chance to fix the rose bushes or fight the original fine. That same evening, I spotted Karen in her perfectly manicured backyard, setting up fancy garden chairs in a circle. At first, I thought she was having one of her tea parties, but then cars started filling up our street. People in business suits walked through her white picket fence gate, carrying folders and laptops. That's when I realized she had moved the HOA meetings from the community center to her backyard, right under my bedroom window. I tried to focus on making dinner, but their voices carried clearly through my open window. Property values are our primary concern. Karen's voice rang out above the others. Some people clearly don't understand the standards we've worked so hard to maintain. I knew exactly who she was talking about. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 separate emails from Karen, each with more violations. She'd spotted from her yard my garbage. Ken was visible from the street. I'd brought it in that morning. My welcome mat was non-regulation brown. It was actually dark beige, and my mailbox numbers were half an inch too small. They were the same size as everyone else's. I decided to take the high road and wrote a calm, detailed email explaining that I'd been out of town when the rose bushes grew, had trimmed them immediately upon return, and requested a hearing about the original fine as allowed in our HOA bylaws. Karen's response came within minutes. Request denied due to submission timing. Rules are rules, dear. We're just protecting our investments. The harassment didn't stop there. Every single day brought a new violation notice. Karen started walking her tiny poodle past my house 6 times a day, taking pictures with her phone. She even brought out a measuring tape to check the height of my grass while I was trying to work from home. When I went out to talk to her, she just gave me this sugary sweet smile that made my skin crawl. I tried reaching out to other HOA board members, but they either didn't respond or forwarded my emails straight to Karen. My attempts to speak at their backyard meetings were shut down because I hadn't submitted a speaker request form 14 business days in advance, a rule I later discovered didn't exist in our bylaws. The final straw came when Karen had the nerve to knock on my door on a Sunday morning. She stood there in her designer workout clothes, holding a stack of papers. "We've noticed you haven't paid your updated fines," she said with fake concern in her voice. "I'd hate for this to affect your standing in the community or your home ownership status." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my roses anymore. Karen wasn't just being petty. She was systematically building a case against me. But why? As I watched her walk away, stopping to take yet another picture of my violations, I noticed something odd. She completely ignored my next-door neighbors. Overgrown hedges and peeling paint. In fact, now that I thought about it, she seemed to only target certain homeowners with her ruler and camera. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through neighborhood social media groups, and there it was. Buried in old posts and comments, a pattern started to emerge. Either Karen was the pickiest HOA president in history, or something bigger was going on in our quiet suburban community. Looking at the growing stack of violation notices on my counter, I made a decision. If Karen wanted to play by the rules, it was time I learned exactly what those rules were, and who they really served. I was walking my dog past Mr. Chen's house when I heard crying. There he was, sitting on his front porch, holding a wind chime in his trembling hands. "They're making me take it down," he said, his voice breaking. This was my late wife's favorite. The HOA had just slapped him with a $150 fine for a wind chime he'd had up for 15 years. That's when something in me snapped. I sat down next to him and shared my own HOA nightmare. As we talked, Sarah from across the street came rushing over. She'd seen us talking and had her own story to tell. Her daughter's pink bicycle, parked for just one night in their driveway while they cleaned the garage, had earned her a $300 fine. Her voice shook with anger as she told us how Karen had taken photos of the bike at 6 a.m. before they could move it. "This isn't right," I said, pulling out my phone. "Let's meet at Riverside Coffee tomorrow morning. Bring every HOA notice you've received in the last year." The next day, our little group grew. The Patels joined us, furious about their $200 fine for having non-approved marigolds during Diwali. Tom Baker brought documentation of his fight over a unauthorized security camera he'd installed after a break-in attempt. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, who barely spoke English, came with her grandson to translate her story about being fined for having a non-regulation screen door. We spread our papers across 3 coffee shop tables. Mr. Chen, who'd worked as an accountant before retiring, noticed something odd in the fine print of our notices. "Look here," he said, pointing to the routing numbers on our payment slips. "These don't match." Sarah pulled up the HOA's official website on her laptop. "The account number on their website is different from these notices," she whispered, her eyes widening. I started making a spreadsheet on my laptop, listing every fine, every date, every violation. A pattern emerged. Houses with elderly residents got hit harder. Working parents faced more fines during business hours. And strangely, some of the worst violations on Karen's friends' properties never received notices at all. Mrs. Johnson from the corner house joined us, carrying a thick folder. "I've been photographing violations for 3 years," she said, spreading out dozens of pictures. "Look at this." She showed us photos of Karen's best friend's house with Christmas decorations up well into February. A clear violation that never got fined. As we dug deeper, Mr. Chen found something in the HOA's publicly available tax records. The money from fines was supposed to go into the Community Improvement Fund, but the numbers didn't add up. Thousands of dollars were being diverted into a vague category called administrative expenses. "What exactly counts as administrative expenses?" Tom asked, leaning forward. "That's what we need to find out," I replied, just as my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Karen herself. "Your rose bushes are still 1.5 inches too high. Second violation notice incoming." My hands shook as I read the message to the group. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Wait," she said, pulling up an old Facebook post on her phone. "Look at this photo from the HOA summer party last year. Karen's got rose bushes twice as high as yours." We all huddled around the phone, studying the image. In the background of Karen posing with her Garden Committee Member of the Year award were rose bushes that clearly violated the same rule she was using to harass me. Just then, Mr. Chen's grandson, a law student, walked into the coffee shop. He took one look at our spread of documents and sat down. "You guys," he said, pulling out his laptop, "I think we might have enough here for a case. But first, we need to—" The coffee shop door chimed. Karen walked in, her perfect smile freezing as she saw us all together. Behind her was Frank Thompson, her husband, and the HOA board's treasurer. What happened next would change our neighborhood forever. My hands were shaking as I spread the HOA documents across my kitchen table. What started as a simple search through old records had turned into something much bigger. Mr. Chen sat beside me, his reading glasses perched on his nose, while Sarah paced behind us, bouncing her sleeping baby in her arms. "Look at this," Mr. Chen whispered, his finger trailing down a column of numbers. "The fines from last January don't match the bank deposits." He pulled out another paper from his folder, a statement he'd gotten from his friend at the bank. The difference wasn't just a few dollars. We're talking thousands missing. I grabbed my laptop and started making a spreadsheet of every fine issued in the past 3 years. My stomach dropped when I saw the pattern. "Guys, notice how the violations spike every time there's a home sale pending?" The numbers were clear as day. Karen and her friends on the board would target homes just before they went on the market, forcing owners to either pay huge fines or sell below market value. Sarah leaned over my shoulder, her baby now awake and curious. "Remember the Johnsons? They sold their house for way less than they wanted after getting hit with all those emergency violations last summer." She pulled up an old Facebook post on her phone. Karen's daughter had bought that house, and mysteriously, all violations disappeared the day after the sale. Just then, my doorbell rang. We all froze. Through the peephole, I saw Karen standing there with her signature clipboard, a smirk playing on her face. I motioned everyone to stay quiet and grabbed my phone to record. "Just doing our monthly inspection," Karen chirped when I opened the door. "Oh my, is that an unauthorized gathering I see? Section 7.3 clearly states, all resident meetings must be approved by the board." She stretched her neck trying to peek past me. "This is a private dinner party, Karen. In my private home." I kept my voice steady, remembering the lawyer's advice about staying calm and documenting everything. "Well, we've had noise complaints." She paused dramatically. "And I noticed your garbage bins were 6 inches too close to the street this morning. That'll be another $150. She scribbled on her clipboard with obvious pleasure. After she left, we dove back into the records with renewed determination. Mr. Chen's daughter, a junior accountant, joined us online and helped us trace the money trail. The administrative expenses account Karen had created wasn't just suspicious, it was a complete sham. Board members were writing themselves checks for consulting fees and special projects that never happened. Sarah discovered something even more shocking on her laptop. "Look at these property records." She turned the screen toward us. Karen and the board treasurer had been buying up houses through a shell company after driving down their prices with excessive fines. They'd flipped 6 homes in our neighborhood alone, making hundreds of thousands in profit. I was about to call Detective Martinez when my phone buzzed. My heart stopped when I saw the email notification. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. They were trying to take my home, my grandmother's home, over that ridiculous $79 garden fine that had somehow multiplied into thousands. The room went quiet. Mr. Chen put his hand on my shoulder. Sarah hugged her baby tighter. Through my window, I could see Karen in her yard, hosting another one of her emergency board meetings. She raised her wine glass in my direction, that smug smile still on her face. But she didn't know what we'd found. She didn't know about the evidence sitting right here on my kitchen table. She didn't know that tomorrow morning I had an appointment with Detective Martinez, and I was bringing 3 years' worth of proof that would wipe that smile right off her face. I looked at my friends, my neighbors who had become my allies in this fight. They think they can bully us into silence, I said, straightening the papers into a neat stack. But I think it's time we show them what happens when you mess with the wrong neighborhood. As if on cue, my printer spat out another document. A certified letter from the bank showing exactly where those missing thousands had gone. Karen had no idea, but her perfect little kingdom was about to come crashing down. My hands were shaking as I stared at the foreclosure notice. But I wasn't about to let Karen win. That morning, as I watched her strut around her front yard in her designer workout clothes, measuring her precious neighborhood standards with that stupid golden ruler, something inside me snapped. I grabbed my 3-inch thick folder of evidence and drove straight to the police station. Detective Martinez raised his eyebrows as I spread out the documents across his desk. "So you're telling me this all started with rose bushes?" he asked, picking up the original $79 fine notice. I nodded, then pulled out the real smoking gun, a stack of bank statements. Mr. Chen had helped me track down through public records. "Look at these deposits," I said, pointing to a pattern of numbers. Every time they collected a fine, the money split into 2 accounts. The community account only got half. The other half, I slid another paper forward, showing transfers to a private account named Administrative Expenses. The detective leaned forward, suddenly very interested. But that wasn't all I had. Sarah had spent weeks photographing every single yard in the neighborhood, documenting violations. Houses belonging to Karen's friends had Christmas decorations up until March, unpainted fences and overgrown lawns, with 0 fines. Meanwhile, elderly residents like Mr. Chen got slapped with violations for things as small as having the wrong color mailbox. As Detective Martinez flipped through our evidence, his phone buzzed. "Interesting timing," he said. "We just got another complaint about your HOA. A family lost their house last month over similar fines. They've been living in their car." My stomach turned. How many others had Karen terrorized? I pulled out my final piece of evidence, a USB drive containing recordings from the past 6 HOA meetings. Mr. Chen's grandson had helped us hide a legal recording device in the community center's flower pot. The things Karen said when she thought nobody was listening made my blood boil. "We need to move carefully," Detective Martinez warned. "These types of cases can be tricky. HOAs have a lot of legal power." But I could see in his eyes that he knew we had something solid. That Friday, as Karen started the monthly HOA meeting with her usual speech about community standards, she had no idea what was coming. I sat quietly in the back, watching her wave around violation notices, like some kind of twisted trophy. Mr. Chen was next to me, his wind chimes deliberately tinkling from his pocket, a small act of rebellion. "And now we need to discuss the Thompson property," Karen announced, pulling up a picture of my house on the projector. "As you can see, the continued defiance of our standards has left us no choice but to proceed with—" The door opened. Detective Martinez walked in, followed by 2 other officers and a man in a suit, who I recognized as the district attorney. Karen's perfectly lined lips froze mid-sentence. "Mrs. Thompson," Detective Martinez said, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "We need to discuss some financial discrepancies in the HOA accounts." I'll never forget how Karen's face changed. From confusion to realization to pure rage. She tried to grab her laptop and run, but Mr. Chen's grandson, a former high school football player, blocked the door. As the officers read her rights, she pointed at me and screamed, "This is all because you couldn't trim your stupid roses!" But the best part? The local news van pulling up outside, right on schedule. Turns out Sarah had contacted them weeks ago, with proof of the HOA's pattern of elderly discrimination. Karen's perfectly curated community image was about to become very, very public. As they led her away, I caught a glimpse of her house through the community center window. Her own rose bushes were at least 3 inches above regulation height. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The other board members started frantically shuffling papers, but it was too late. We had copies of everything. Our quiet neighborhood was about to learn just how much power they'd given to the wrong people. But the real question was, how many other HOAs out there were pulling the same scheme? The morning of the HOA meeting felt different. I walked into the community center with a thick folder under my arm. Detective Martinez's words still ringing in my ears. "We've got enough to move forward." My hands were shaking. but my voice wouldn't be. Karen sat at the head table in her signature blue blazer, tapping her manicured nails against her water glass like she always did when she was nervous. She must have noticed something was off. The room was packed, with faces she'd never seen at these meetings before. Mr. Chen sat in the front row, his wind chime softly jingling from his pocket. Sarah and her daughter Emily were there too, Emily's illegal bicycle helmet proudly displayed on her lap. "Before we begin today's agenda," I announced, standing up before Karen could start her usual speech, "I have some questions about our HOA's financial reports." The room went dead silent. I could see Karen's face turn a shade paler as I pulled out the first document. "According to these bank statements," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "over $50,000 in collected fines have disappeared into an account labeled administrative expenses over the past 3 years. I paused, letting that sink in. Funny thing is, when I checked with the state registry, that account doesn't exist in our HOA's official records. Karen's perfectly lined lips twitched. "That's confidential information." "How dare you!" The double doors swung open. Detective Martinez walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Actually, Ms. Thompson, as part of a registered homeowners association in this state, those records are public information. What happened next was better than any TV drama." Karen tried to bolt, but her designer heels betrayed her. She knocked over her water glass, sending it shattering across the floor. Just like her carefully built facade was about to shatter. The evidence was overwhelming. We had it all. Doctored financial statements, selective enforcement records, even emails discussing which homeowners to target next. The officers found a separate ledger in Karen's home office showing exactly how she and her 2 board cronies had been splitting up the stolen fine money. But the real shock came when we discovered what they'd been using the money for. Karen had been funding a fake landscaping company, basically paying herself to write up violations, then collecting fines for those same violations. Talk about a twisted business model. The best part? Remember those security cameras Karen insisted we install for community safety? They caught her measuring people's grass at 3 a.m. with a ruler and flashlight. The footage became key evidence in the prosecution's case. One by one, other neighbors came forward with their stories. The single mom who almost lost her home over unapproved holiday decorations. The retired teacher who had to take out a loan to pay bogus emergency assessment fees. Each story added another charge to Karen's growing list of crimes. By sunset, Karen and her 2 accomplices were doing the perp walk to the police cruiser. Her last words before the car door slammed: "I was just maintaining property values." Yeah, right. The aftermath brought changes nobody expected. Our new HOA board, elected by actual vote instead of Karen's usual appointment system, immediately revised all the ridiculous rules. Kids can now play outside without fear of noise violations. Gardens can grow without measuring tapes hovering over them. Mr. Chen even organized a wind chime festival, partly to celebrate, partly to annoy Karen in her new temporary residence behind bars. My rose bushes? They're thriving, growing as tall as they please. Sometimes when I'm pruning them, neighbors stop to chat. Real conversations, not whispered warnings about violation notices. We've created something Karen never understood. A true community. The $79 fine that started it all? It's framed in our community center now, right next to the news article about Karen's conviction. It reminds us that sometimes the smallest injustice can expose the biggest crimes, but only if you're brave enough to stand up and ask questions. Last week I got a letter from another neighborhood dealing with similar HOA issues. They wanted advice on how to investigate their board. As I wrote back, I couldn't help but smile. Karen thought she was building an empire, but instead, she taught us all how to tear down walls and build bridges. Our story even inspired a new state law requiring regular audits of HOA finances. They're calling it the Rosebush Rule, proving that sometimes the sweetest victories grow from the thorniest situations.